There we go. We have one of our smaller nest pieces. Just need to do the other one, then we'll start the long ones. There we go. We have our nest pieces done. They came out really nice. Our box is finished. Just a little sanding, and I think I'll put a coat of oil on these and call it a day. All right, as usual, I had a great time building this project with you. I hope you come back, see us here again in the garage.
Said, hey, how are you? It's been a long, long time. I just found your number, thought I'd drop you a line. You know I've been out on this road such a long, long time. Just wanted to let you know I'm doing just fine. But hey, I'm doing fine out here on the road. As long as I have friends to call, I'm never alone. Folks wonder how I take all that driving all the time. As long as I have friends to call, I'm doing just fine. Said, hey, did I wake you? I'm sorry if I did.
When smoking gives you COPD, you learn to lie a little bit. You make up excuses like, I have to get my keys. You guys go on. Anything so you can walk at your own pace. I used to do that all the time. Those lies don't work anymore. My tip is, the worst lies are the lies you tell yourself. Like smoking isn't that dangerous.
You can quit. For free help, call.
Hi, I'm Dr. Katia Castillo, and I have been practicing OBGYN for 26 years. When my pregnant patients ask me whether they should get vaccinated against COVID-19, I tell them that vaccination protects them from this serious disease. I know COVID-19 disease can be very serious in pregnant women. It can affect pregnancy or the baby. Millions of people, including pregnant women, have gotten these safe and effective vaccines. Learn more at cdc.gov.
Scene 103, take one.
I have been 100% into getting vaccinated, and then I asked you, and you hesitated.
Yeah.
I thought we'd be on the same page about this, and we're not.
I feel like even if I were to catch it, my body is strong enough to fight it off.
What if you're one of those cases and you end up in the hospital?
Yeah.
That's what I'm scared of.
Recientemente mi esposa comenzó a actuar de forma extraña. Le colgaba a un lado del rostro.
Sabía que algo me pasaba, pero no sabía qué.
No estaba seguro, pero parecía un ataque cerebral.
Aún así no perdiste tiempo llamando al 911. El personal de emergencias me atendió de inmediato y lo notificaron al hospital.
Llame al 911 si presenta cualquier síntoma de un ataque cerebral. Los socorristas y los hospitales están trabajando para mantenerlo seguro durante la pandemia del coronavirus.
Right here, baby. Look. Uma. ¿Cuántos años tienes?
No.
Something more than a birthday is happening here. Once you can see it, you can help. The sooner you recognize the signs of autism, the sooner you can make a lifetime of difference for your child. Start by answering a few simple questions at screenforautism.org.
Alrighty, all set?
Yes, we are.
All right. Stand by. Count you in. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Tuesday, February 1st, 2022 meeting of the Long Meadow School Committee. Just a reminder that all votes while participating remotely must be made by roll call vote. There will be allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next item is correspondence. correspondence to record. Next up is approval of minutes, which will be tabled until our next meeting. We do not have minutes to approve right now, so that brings us to visitor comments. And just a reminder on visitor comments, everybody will have one opportunity to make a visitor comment. This is your only opportunity in the meeting to make a visitor comment. Please tell us your name and your address. And again, give a 3-minute time limit. I will let you know when that time limit is up. And I thank you in advance for sticking to the 3 minutes. So, do we have anybody who would like to make a visitor comment? I see Amy Tyler's hand is up. Amy, go ahead. We can't hear you.
We need to unmute you, Amy.
Amy, hold on a second.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I'm Amy Tyler. I live at 204 Longview Drive in Longmeadow. I'm a parent of a middle school and a high school student, as well as an LPS employee. My words tonight may seem a bit repetitive, but I feel it is important to be an additional voice to this conversation. Tonight, I would like to respectfully request that as soon as DESE changes their wording to recommend masking, that the committee commits to an optional masking policy for all students and staff, regardless of vaccination status and rates. In last week's Board of Health meeting, the board openly acknowledged that KN95 masks were preferable and that cloth and surgical masks were not effective. The CDC states on their website that KN95 masks are neither made for or recommended for children, and that KN95 masks are not effective for prolonged use. Considering these facts, it seems clear that the time for forcing kids to wear ineffective masks is over. I respectfully urge the committee to do some research and some soul searching on the negative health and emotional effects the mask mandate has had on our children. There is plenty of information out there. I can recommend the recent article in The Atlantic, The Case Against Masks at School. In addition, looking at districts' own data, it is very clear that the vaccinated are getting and spreading the virus as much, if not more, than the unvaccinated. Knowing this, I cannot see how an unvaccinated person presents any more danger than a vaccinated person. There is simply no data to prove that. A mask optional policy for vaccinated only will unnecessarily create division in the classroom as well as the workplace. Segregation of unvaccinated children and staff is medical discrimination, pure and simple. I have several examples of peer pressure, judgment, bullying, and isolation that my own daughter experienced firsthand at Longmeadow High School. No 16-year-old should have to deal with this kind of added pressure. Furthermore, there are schools in our area and around the country who have had mask optional policies all year long, and we have seen virtually no difference in COVID rates in these schools. This being said, while I had personally felt the negative effects of a differentiated mask policy, I have also seen from personal experience that LPS has created a favorable climate for anyone who feels like they need to wear a mask or need to have their children wear a mask. The district is clearly sensitive to the needs of people who are still fearful. I can see no reason to expect any backlash to anyone who continues to wear a mask with an optional plan. Having the choice is what makes the difference. Lastly, on a different note, I would like to voice my
Amy, you're at 3 minutes, so if you could just finish up, please.
I can finish up. I would like to voice my concern about a few actions at some of the last meetings. During the December 14th meeting, the committee chair, Mr. Shea, actively shut down the speech of a citizen, Eric Shapiro, for questioning the credibility of a key policy influencer. The stifling of his freedom of speech was astonishingly disrespectful. Then, at the January 11th meeting, Mr. O'Shea took valuable time to thank vaccinated people and urge the unvaccinated to be vaccinated and to vaccinate children. This was a gross overreach and abuse of his position. The role of this committee is not to advise the community on medical choices. I respectfully ask the committee to address his actions and make appropriate corrections. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amy. Anyone else who would like to make a visitor comment? I see a hand.
Wait, can you scroll so we can see who that is? Is that, I can't read the name. Jessica?
It says Ariana.
Ariana? Is that right? All right, Ariana.
Hi, actually, Ariana's mom. But my name is Anna Vicus, and I live on 7 Hanover. And thank you, Amy, for saying all that. It's been refreshing to hear actually a teacher and a mom with children to come out and actually say what you just said. I've been kind of waiting this whole time for an educator just to come out and actually just say how it is from a different perspective. So I just want to say that I agree with Amy as well. I am here to advocate for mask optional also come March 1st. I came from a city in Cincinnati. I just moved here a couple years ago. They have been back to normal since August. Everything is fine. They have a huge school district, bigger than ours, less vaccinations. Everyone's still alive. Everyone's doing good. I'm sure there's other educators and teachers that also feel this way, that don't feel like they can come on here and say how they feel, and other parents as well. But yeah, it's getting a little bit tiring. My daughter cried on the way to school today. I know that's probably not such a big deal to other people, but she did. She's sick of the mask. She has a huge rash on her chin, gets caught in her hair, all these little small problems that it makes me feel bad. I get to go around Target and everywhere else, not wear my mask, and she's sitting in a class all day long. She drew a picture of, I don't even know, actually, I don't know what the assignment was, but her picture was what she sees like in the cafeteria. It was a great picture, but it was pretty sad. I can email it to you. It was basically just 3 kids to a lunch table, and it's sad. Also, kissing her every day with a mask on and then not able to see her face smiling to school. She loves school. I'm actually very happy with all the teachers, the principal there, the assistant principal. Everyone has been great, and I'm just looking forward to finally knowing them and seeing their faces and experiencing school the way it should be. I know my child is only in 1st grade, but she started at preschool, and she's only known school with COVID. So I'm getting a little bit tired of that. And that's pretty much it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It looked like Jessica, you're up next.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Jessica Kelby, and I live at 37 South Ave. I just had a thought that I wanted to bring up, I guess. I think I just have questions at this point now that I didn't have before all this, but we had the past over a year, whenever Desi made their decisions and recommendations and whatever, like, we didn't elect Jeff Riley, and Jeff Riley didn't have the authority to do what he did, in my opinion. And he did like, that mask mandate was wrong, like, objectively wrong. And a lot of us made that case to you guys and said, well, you're ignoring all the downsides and you're focusing on this one single issue. And these are our kids, right? And so we elect local officials to stand up to those unelected bureaucrats that make these sweeping unilateral decisions that are potentially harmful to us. And so it's kind of disheartening to know that all these people that we elected onto the school committee didn't understand or didn't try or just didn't have the courage to stand up to those unelected people that just stepped in and decided what was good for our kids when it was so wrong. And I hope that you guys step in and correct it as soon as you possibly can. And then another thing I wanted to show you is I got a letter that my son that's in pre-K. He's one of the 2 kids that's unmasked in the entire pre-K. And he gets notes home every day to like tell us about his day. So this one is, they talked about feelings today and facial expressions, body language, feelings, showing your feelings. And I just want to let you know, and I know you already know, but I just want to reiterate that I had to jump through hoops. I had to get a doctor's note, and I had to write like a 5-paragraph essay and convince and make a case, and it was not simple or easy for me to get him exempted from masking. And if I hadn't done that stuff, your policy would have meant that he was learning about facial expressions today with a mask on. And that's ridiculous, objectively ridiculous. And I hope at the end of this, when everybody's on the same page about how horrible this all was and how just detrimental it was to our kids, you don't forget that a lot of us were here telling you that this was bad, and you don't get to say that you were just doing the right thing or you didn't know how bad it could be. Like, we brought it to your attention all along the way, like with sources, and it didn't change your mind. So just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Anyone else who would like to make a comment? Jeremy Dugan, you're up.
All right, good evening. I have a prepared statement here. First of all, I want to thank Dr. O'Shea, the administrators from my children's school. My name's Jeremy Dugan. I'm from 52 South Park Ave. I'm really appreciative of Mrs. Hutton's and Mrs. Nelson's staff and administrators. They do a great job for my children. So thank you for all they've done in the past few years. It has not been easy. I'm speaking up today because I believe it is time for our school district to return to normal with respect to masks and social distancing. I have a few points I'd like to make. First, our community has worked hard and has a high vaccine rate. As of January 26, 95% of the eligible population has had at least one dose, and 81% of the population is fully vaccinated. So kudos to our town for that. As to the school-age children, 83% have received at least one dose, and 75% are fully vaccinated. And this is our least risky aged population that is not at risk for severe health outcomes, and the list goes on, and we all know that. Second, our community has access to other levels of protection so that each family and individual can protect themselves. We're well beyond the days of I wear my mask to protect you. N95s and KF94s respirators are effective regardless of what other community members wear. The school district is in process of implementing a new testing strategy to get weekly tests into every student's hands if they opt in. And as of Dr. O'Shea's email this morning, that is over 1,000 Longmeadow students. In review of nearby communities with and without mask mandates, our community does not fare better or worse, and the kinds of types of masks we wear, not respirators, are not effective in our current COVID environment. Third, medical experts across the nation are urging schools and school committees and public health departments to return schools back to normal. This is because the effects of social distancing and masking have played a significant role in rising rates of developmental delays, stress and mental health issues, and lower student and teacher connections because they have not seen each other's faces in over 2 years. Last week in the Washington Post op-ed, 3 Massachusetts doctors advocated for return to normal, stating in part that the CDC's updated guidance on masking, quote, also offer a pathway to compromise in the place where masking policies are most hotly debated in schools. Respirators and other high-quality masks are highly effective in protecting wearers, regardless of what people are doing around them. I provided a copy to you all last night in preparation for this meeting. Furthermore, the Massachusetts Secretary of Education, Mr. James Pizer, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Mrs. Mary Lou Sutters, are encouraging higher education institutions to, quote-unquote, regain a sense of normalcy in their communications with public and private higher education presidents on January 28. Quote, colleges and universities should accelerate their efforts to transition back to near normal conditions. Elementary and secondary education institutions should also follow suit and not be excluded from this message. I know that the Board of Health should be responsible for public health mandates, but they have abdicated their responsibility for public health criteria within the schools to the superintendent and to the school committee. Recently,
3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm almost done. Dr. Bivsky said that individuals can decide not to wear a mask in violation of this order because it is not enforceable. I don't believe that's a way to be governed, but alas, I appeal to you to make the difficult and right decision to return our schools to normal. We don't have to wait until February 28th to make this decision. It might cause strain administratively between you and DESE, but you guys have it in your right to make the right decision for our children to get them back to normal. Thank you for hearing my opinion, and I hope that you consider the facts that I've laid out this evening.
Thank you, Jeremy. Katie, you're up next. Last. Okay. She needs to get unmuted. Stand by, Katie. Try that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, Katie Barker here. I live at 663 Longmeadow Street, and I am a physician who lives in this community, has children in the elementary schools, and works at Bay State Hospital. I just want to thank you all for continuing to address this issue and for doing all the things that you do to keep our children safe. I will echo what Mr. Dugan said, and the administrators at our children's school have done a phenomenal job of keeping our kids safe, and we thank you for that. I don't have a prepared speech tonight. I just want to say that I too am exhausted with COVID. Living this world with small children and in the healthcare setting, it's exhausting, and I think all of us can't wait for a time when we can be back to normal. But I'm here to say it's not yet. We have higher rates of COVID in our community than we have ever had in the pandemic pre-Omicron. So we are still not back to our highest levels yet that we had before Omicron. That's in our town, that's in our surrounding community, and that is in our hospital. Our hospital is it's a kind of a disaster. We have been at over 100% capacity for weeks now. There will be a time in the future where going back to mask optional or even no masking absolutely will be the right thing to do. Just not quite there yet. And I think I just really plead you all to follow DESE guidance, to listen to the Board of Health's recommendations, and to really continue to support the science and support the public health measures that we've seen work. We're not there yet. Maybe we're close, but we're just not there yet. So I appreciate your time, and thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Katie. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Not seeing other hands. Oh, Katie Hastings, I think is a new hand, yes. Katie, we just need to get you unmuted and then you will be up.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to all the people that came out today to speak. You know that we've been here meeting after meeting advocating for what we feel is right for our kids. These masks need to go. I'm sorry, but whoever just spoke, Katie, I'm Katie too, the last Katie, there's no evidence that masks work. These kids are not wearing these masks properly. My children are coming home telling me they're wearing their mask below their nose all day. Several kids are wearing their mask below their nose all day, getting yelled at 100 times. I'm really sick and tired of it going back to the masks. Masks are not stopping aerosol spreading virus. And honestly, my patience is wearing thin on these people that keep going back to masking. First of all, masks don't work. Second of all, masking children is child abuse. These kids have been through enough. There are no studies to show that schools with or without masks are faring any better. In fact, there are schools all over the country without mask mandates, and they are doing just fine, if not maybe better than us. How many times a day are our kids touching their face, touching their noses, fixing their mask, pulling it up because someone's yelling at them? This is just getting to be ridiculous. It is time to move on. If you want to mask your child, go right ahead. I'm not going to mask mine any longer beyond DESE's timeline. Honestly, I just can't even express how angry I am about people coming on and talking about these masks the way they do. They are not effective. They are not working. They are muzzling our children. They are losing valuable time in school where they're getting yelled at for not wearing them properly. They're not able to see a smile in 2 years. My daughter told me she feels like she's living in a horror movie seeing these kids wearing masks. It's horrible. Also, Dr. Katie, how many children are you seeing in the hospital? Because honestly, this is not affecting children. This is getting to a point where we need to start sheltering the vulnerable, and these doctors need to start talking about the truth. If you are obese, or you have diabetes, or you're elderly, then you are at high risk. All of the rest of us need to start living our lives. These children are not the ones filling up the hospitals. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Not seeing any new hands. All right. we are going to move on. Thank you to everybody for your comments, and just a reminder as well, we welcome comments by email. All of us read all of the email comments that we get, and we appreciate hearing from folks either at the meetings or by email. So thank you very much. All right, next up, we have school committee announcements and recognitions. Anyone have any announcements or recognitions? Gian.
Hi. Thank you, Kevin. I just want to take a moment. I was lucky to, I'm always looking for ways to celebrate Long Meadow Public Schools. But this morning I was lucky I got to go to the Grinspoon. There was a little breakfast to celebrate the teachers who have been nominated for Grinspoon Awards. And so it was nice to see, my kids have grown up in Long Meadow Public Schools. It was nice to see teachers and principals that they had when they were little, that they currently have. So it was just great to be able to be there to celebrate the educators who are working, the educators that nominated the educators, because it does take, a little bit of time. So that was a great way to start the day. And then I was made aware, I know that the Scholastic Art and Writing honorees or awardees are starting to be celebrated. And so that was just another kind of like, this is just, got my mind thinking like, we've just really got some great students, great families, educators in schools going on in the schools. I got to go over to Wolf Swamp this morning and just see, I was dropping off some papers and I got to see, again, like they were hit so hard with that, the plumbing issues, but they're cooking right along. They're, the kids are in the hallways, the teachers are out, the office staff is greeting you and business as usual. So that's a testament to their strength. And so I guess I was just mentioning all this because, as we're going to be talking about the budget tonight, and just in thinking of there's going to be some hard decisions, going to be some hard, challenging conversations and thoughts and questions, and not just tonight, but going into the, the full budget season. I just really wanted to, thank, and I know Tom, you've been here for a couple of years, and a lot of the stuff was going on before you, but I think it's important to recognize that these opportunities exist for our students, our families, our educators, our schools to shine because of budgeting and planning, and I know there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes into it. But again, my head was just thinking about as we go into this conversation tonight and into the next couple of weeks. I just wanted to say that I'm grateful for the budgeting and the planning that helps make the opportunities, because it's about what we want our students to shine, we want our families to shine, our educators and our schools. And I today alone I saw three moments of that, and that was just within the span of an hour. So I just thought it was worth to share that again as we're thinking about, and not just budget, but everything in general. The challenges of the pandemic these past 2 weeks. We just heard some people who are not happy with the way things have been going. So I just wanted to kind of point out there is so much good stuff going on, and just celebrate it.
Thank you, Jill. Other school committee announcements or recognitions? Mary, go ahead.
Yes, I have a few recognitions. I also want to echo my congratulations to the Grinspoon Award nominees. It is a great honor to be nominated for this award. And I'd also like to acknowledge those teachers and staff members who took the time to nominate their colleagues. It's a time-consuming process during a very busy school year, and it's very meaningful to have a colleague nominate you for such a prestigious award. Next, LPVEC had their open house this evening from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. So I went from 5 to about 6:10 and then raced home to take this call. But it was just a real joy to be in the classrooms, to see our staff and students in action. The shops are just bustling places of energy, and it was really great to hear the kids speak so knowledgeably about their shops. I would also like to acknowledge Mayla Allen. Her mom was on this call because on Friday night she got a half-court shot during the LHS varsity game, and it was just one of those moments that could be on a highlight reel. I coach students in grades 3 through 6, and we happened to attend the game, and it was just really inspiring. So congratulations to Mayla, freshman at Long Meadow High School. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Any other announcements or recognition? Bronwyn, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to assure the community members and all the people that email us and the guests that come to the meetings and speak that we do, I read all the emails and appreciate all of the links you send with some really great articles, some that I've seen, some that I have not seen. So if you want to continue emailing us, I really appreciate that. I find it very helpful, and I definitely read them and take everything into consideration. Again, right now we have to follow DESE guidelines, and I mean it looks like there's a date that may change, but until that happens, we do have to follow those. But I do appreciate everyone's involvement. I know people are really passionate about this, and please keep sending along those great articles. Thanks.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Anyone else from the committee? Okay. Business with guests. Marty, I'm going to turn it over to you. Sure.
Well, thank you. A lot of squares on our Zoom screen tonight, and that's because the administrative team has joined us this evening, as they always do when we present the next year's budget. And so tonight we're pleased to have an opportunity to present to the committee a recommended budget for fiscal year 23. This is the budget that would drive programming and support teaching and learning in the 22-23 academic year. And I want to thank a number of folks for helping us arrive at this recommendation. Certainly our partners on the town side, the town manager, the chief financial officer, Jim Layden, they have been very helpful in helping us understand the fiscal environment of the town and giving us feedback. And much of this is our jumping off point, you'll recall, was on December 6th when there was a joint meeting of the school committee and the select board, and we had an opportunity to hear from some financial projections. So thanks to them. Thanks to the school committee, and in particular the finance subcommittee that met last week to give us some valuable feedback and helped us arrive at this recommendation and the message behind it. And also, obviously, to the entire administrative team, we hope that we present this as a team because we think that it drives our team goals. And a particular shout out to Mr. Mazza, who has been buried in spreadsheets and databases for a long time now, and helps us make sense of a challenging budget for FY23. So thanks to all involved. And as I pull up the presentation here, I would remind everyone that this is, what was there was an expression, it gets late early here. I think it was a guy, Gary Barra said that, right? So it's late, but it's early. We're putting together a budget early, many months before the beginning of the 22-23 academic year. But yet we also are beginning to understand what some of the fiscal variables that are out there, including the state budget. So make this larger for us. So tonight's recommendation We believe that there are a number of factors that are sort of driving us and help shape this budget, and we believe that this budget helps us hit some critical targets, and these are targets that are tied to our district improvement plan, to school committee goals, but at the top of the list is the district contractual obligations. We obviously feel like it's our obligation to arrive at fair contractual settlements that help us continue to attract and retain outstanding educators and staff. So we're in the middle of negotiations with all bargaining units now. We believe that this budget will help us stay committed and, in fact, strengthen the continuum of services and programming that's shaped by our commitment to that MTSS model, the multi-tiered systems of support model that we've talked about so many times. And there are a number of critical investments here. There are a number of things that this budget will drive. I think for the longest time, we have placed a priority in this district on class size in general, with a specific focus on elementary class size, and we'll share some numbers with you shortly. This budget also helps us stay committed to the regular education interventionists that were introduced at the high school and the middle school in FY22. This budget, we'll talk about it later, also proposes an additional school psychologist. You'll see kind of a running theme throughout this budget presentation is that we are trying to be responsive to the academic and social emotional needs of children, and in particular, we recognize that even before the pandemic, schools were experiencing difficulty meeting the social and academic or social and emotional needs of children. I think the pandemic certainly accelerated some of those needs, but that's something that we want to be attentive to. And so having an additional school psychologist to help us with evaluation services to ensure that we have appropriate plans in place for students is critical. You'll recall last spring that we introduced a administrative model at the elementary level, which would essentially transition us from special education supervisors to assistant principals at the elementary level. So this budget allows us to stay on track with that plan that was developed last year and implemented this year. This budget also allows us to ensure that we are able to incorporate the registered behavioral technicians that the school committee supported the introduction of in the 21-22 school year. These are positions that help us implement behavior plans to make sure that we're properly supporting the needs of the whole child. I want to thank Nick George. This isn't a significant budget factor, but it's worth noting that we always are looking to promote efficiency and make the experience of parents and students easier with our online portal. And so we're introducing some online portal enhancements in terms of the way students pay fees, in terms of the way parents pre-register children. So Nick George has led that effort, and we also want to recognize Diane Dragantis for being a big part of that as well. This budget also allows us to, we had introduced STEAM at the middle school level, and I'm proud to say that this budget will allow us to expand that experience across all 3 grades at the middle level as a related art. So grades 6, 7, and 8 at both schools, the programming will be identical, but we're able to introduce that as a related art at the middle level. And then finally, a sustainable model for supporting our student athletes. Again, the school committee supported the introduction of sort of an in-house athletic trainer. The need and importance of athletic trainers is growing in significance, and more is asked of athletic trainers in terms of policies and procedures and supports, and so we're proud that this budget allows us to sustain that as well. We see this as a cost-effective and sustainable budget. And I know the committee is sensitive to the fiscal position of the town, and again, we're at the really at the early stages of developing a budget that will eventually be considered by the town. And so those conversations are ongoing as well. And then always we want to be responsive to shifting enrollment patterns, and you'll see in some of the charts below how we respond to that. And once again, class size. So I'd like to, if I could, just spend a couple of slides talking about the overall fiscal context. And I guess maybe before I get to that, I think it's worth noting again that while we have some clear targets in mind and we have some certainty around what we want this budget to achieve, it's really important to note that there are a lot of unknowns still. While some targets are very, very clear to us, there are some targets that we're still trying to, that are still taking shape. So many factors, obviously the town projections on the town side, they're still trying to identify what their local receipts will be, what the ultimate costs associated with health insurance and retirement will be, so that they're managing, some significant variables on the town side. For us, it's really one of the big factors is understanding what amount of the ESSER grants will be available to us to apply in FY23. We're fortunate to have the support of these federal COVID grants, and those have really helped us get over the hump during this pandemic. There will be a portion of those ESSER funds that will continue to be available to us in FY23, but the exact amount that will be available to us is still something that Mr. Mazza is still projecting. So there are still some unknowns. All the costs associated with hiring employees, the benefits that you might experience when people retire and you're perhaps hiring lower on the salary schedule, the ultimate program and services for students across the board is something that we need to continue to understand, and what the specific costs of educating students who might be placed out of district is another unknown factor at this point. So there are a number of factors that are, again, known to us. There's some really clear targets, things we want to hit, and then there's a number of factors that we still need to pin down and that are still taking shape. Some good news, I think, for Long Meadow Public Schools in the town came from the Governor Baker's budget that was announced, I think it was January 26th. In that budget, Governor Baker had projected an increase of $736,000 in Chapter 78 to Long Meadow. I went back to 1993, and I think it's the largest increase that Long Meadow has experienced that I could see. So it's a significant bump, and I think it's really worth kind of drawing everybody's attention to, in my opinion, because I think, number one, it represents the implementation of the Student Opportunity Act. Student Opportunity Act, in turn, represents the implementation of the findings of the Foundation Budget Review Commission. So for about almost 10 years now, there's been some concern about funding formula for schools in Massachusetts. The Foundation Budget Review Commission issued findings that basically said that the funding formula really wasn't recognizing the true cost of educating children in Massachusetts, and that there's really a statewide consensus, a statewide legislative consensus that the funding formula wasn't recognizing the true costs associated with health insurance and special education and technology and educating English language learners. So many factors that were part of the original funding formula in 1993 had not evolved over the years. And so with this announcement, it's a really encouraging sign to public schools in Massachusetts that the Student Opportunity Act has a good chance, I'd say, being implemented, and the associated Chapter 78 will make its way to communities like Long Meadow. So that's really encouraging news. Why did Long Meadow's Chapter 78 increase? Because there are frankly some communities that didn't enjoy this increase. I think there's a couple of factors. One is that we have seen an increase in the percentage of low-income students that we're required to serve. And so there's a factor, an aid factor that gets built in response to that. And then also we've seen our overall enrollment just go up a little bit, but every little bit helps in terms of supporting that Chapter 78 funding formula. So this is all encouraging news. And again, for me, it's something that has been on my mind as a superintendent for a long time now, is the adequacy of the state funding formula. And so it's encouraging to see that we are making an ambitious step forward. The other thing I wanted to bring the committee's attention to, and then maybe I can pause and sort of before we get into the nuts and bolts, but this is clipped from the slide deck that the town's financial officer, Jen Layden, had put together back in early December. The committee had seen this, but I thought it was worth kind of resurrecting. And it's sort of worth noting that you'll see that with a projected increase to the schools of $1 million, $900,000 associated with contractual obligations, $100,000 associated with school expenses. It still would, you'll recall, leave the town with a gap of just over $500,000. So that's if they were to raise the tax levy at a 1.75 rate. So that's the sort of that bottom row, bottom right of the slide deck here. So we still have some conversations in front of us in terms of understanding how this budget fits into the overall puzzle that the town is trying to put together. So maybe stop there before we get into this is sort of the wider context. And before we dive into the nuts and bolts, maybe it would be helpful to take a break, or I can continue on.
Let's see if anybody has any questions on the bigger picture stuff before we go on. So committee members, anybody with comments or questions? And it's going to take just a second for us to see people who aren't in the room. So I'll start with people in the room. I see no hands from in the room. I do not see hands from people who are not in the room. Okay, so we'll keep rolling.
Keep going. All right. And again, our admin team is with us tonight, and if there are questions relating to programming and the budget, they're available to help us out. All right, some of these slides sort of speak for themselves. This is a snapshot of our enrollment as of January 2022. You see that our lower grades generally are smaller cohorts than the upper grades. I would note, you'll see the 187 kindergartners that were currently enrolled in Long Meadow. We think that based on census data and current registration levels, that we're probably going to be looking at educating around 200 kindergartners in the coming year, maybe more. And so where right now we're able to serve, we're probably going to need to add K sections next year, and that'll become more apparent in the slide deck as we go through. That's a little snapshot of current enrollment. This is what we're projecting with enrollment next year based on the budget that we have recommended to you. And we've circled a couple of cohorts that we will want to keep our eyes on. And, if we see an increase in registrations in the spring and into the summer, that might be something that we're going to need to come back to the committee with some potential solutions. So that is Blueberry. Important to note right now that the total number of elementary sections this year is 64 across all three schools. Next year, we're projecting 64 as well. And the reason I say that is that in recent years, we've seen more head off to sixth grade than come into kindergarten. And so the result has been that we've achieved some savings at the elementary level. We've been able to reduce the number of sections at the elementary level in response to more heading off to sixth grade than coming in at kindergarten. This year, we will not have that benefit. So it's really, in terms of the overall number of sections across all three elementary schools, we're projecting 64 for next year to match the 64 this year. Center school, again, I'd say that all the numbers on the right, we expect that they'll increase. This would be if we were to open these sections right now. So 16 is a really favorable number and would be advantageous to us. I'm not sure where that number is headed. It could be that it's going to go up as we see spring and summer registrations. And frankly, we tend to see more registrations at the youngest elementary grades, than we do at the older grades. Wolf Swamp, again, we've got a class cohort that we're going to keep our eyes on. That's the first grade, with right now 20 or 21 students in each section. That's something that we'll have to monitor, and if that were to increase, we would want to ask Mr. Mazza to help us understand how we can address that. Similarly, 8th grade at Glenbrook, we are seeing a bubble class leave Williams. Remember the bubble class that's been with us for 3 years? They're heading off to the high school, so that helps us. But there has become a bubble has developed in the cohort of rising 8th graders at Glenbrook. So that's a cohort of students that we'll have to keep our eyes on too. Note that at the middle level, the class size is never completely neat and even because it gets thrown off by enrollment in the foreign languages and the math. So if that number were to, if that's a number the committee is not comfortable with, or if it were to increase, we would want to first look and see, do we have any internal capacity to cover that class, or would we have to hire, go out and hire additional staff to, let's say, add a math teacher, add a science teacher, add a history teacher. That is the middle school. And feel free to interrupt me if the nuts and bolts now. This is the highest of high-level summaries that we could provide to the community. You'll see that the general fund increase, this recommendation would have a $1.094 million increase in the request to come out of the general fund. You'll see that we had a significant decline in what we call special revenue. And essentially, the largest chunk of this relates to the federal COVID grants that will be available to us and applied to the budget in FY23. The net of this is that it's actually a reduced budget in terms of real dollars. It's lower than the FY22 budget, but the increase to the general fund is more significant. Give you some historical perspective on the general fund increase. Again, you'll see that this is a 3% above FY22, and it's on the outer edges in terms of the last 10 years anyways, in terms of the requests that we have made to the town from the general fund. That's it. Any slides? The school committee as a whole and the finance subcommittee has asked us to be sure that we articulate the turnbacks that have been provided at the end of each year. We like to think that we're responsible stewards of the taxpayer dollars, and that we don't spend just to spend, frankly, and if there are funds available at the end of the year, that those are turned back to the town. We've been fortunate in the last couple of years to make significant turnbacks at the end of the fiscal year. And I know the committee has begun to review what that might look like at the end of FY22. Again, by funding source, you'll see that we are heavily reliant on the contributions, the revenue to it that comes to us from the general fund. 93% of the LPS budget is funded from the Town of Long Meadow General Fund. There are a number of grants, however, that have supported our activities over the years. Circuit Breaker is a grant that helps us offset costly special education placements. The METCO grant, this is for our participation in the METCO program, and allows students of color to access education in Long Meadow Public Schools, and so this is a great support to us to help us support those students in the program. We're projecting applying $235,000 school choice revenue to the FY23 budget. Worth noting, I know this question came up in Finance Sub, that this does not assume, neither of these figures assume a certain amount of METCO students to be added next year, or a certain number of school choice slots to be added next year. This is simply a projection of the revenue that would be applied to the budget. It's at the school committee's discretion at some future meeting to decide how many METCO students and how many school choice students we would introduce next year. And then you'll see the COVID grants on the bottom line here. This is a decrease of about $1.6 million, and that is the most significant reduction by fund source that we'll have to account for. The COVID grants, these are the ESSER 2 and 3 grants. These are the ARPA grants that have helped us, again, get over the hump in the pandemic. These are grants that have supplied us with PPE, with additional student desks, with HVAC supplies. In fact, the next slide really articulates some of the pandemic response investments that we made using these federal grants. And you'll see we had a preschool RBT, we had some interventionists at the middle school, some contracted school adjustment counseling services at the high school, all the supplies that we've talked about endlessly over the last couple of years, after school programming, all the staffing and supplies and materials associated with that, and then the tutoring that has supported students to ensure that to limit the disruption, I'd say, that the pandemic has caused. And so these are, if the committee or if the community were wondering, what's going away as a result of us not having full access to those ESSER grants, this is a list of some of the items that helped us get through the pandemic but wouldn't be retained in FY23. This is an accounting of the, I know our town partners and the school committee has been interested in sort of the total number of FTEs. When we say FTEs, this is full-time equivalents. This is like sort of a, not even a head count, but the total number of employees in Long Meadow Public Schools. And you can see how that has evolved since FY17. You'll see that we, again, added a number of positions with the ESSER funds with the ARPA funds, 15.2 to be exact, in FY22, a number of those will not be reintroduced into the FY23 budget. Now, I think it's a fair question to ask around the number of FTEs, and I think it's a reflection, frankly, of the increased need that our students are coming to us with, and the increased expectations that are upon us as educators. And we were to give the committee and the community some idea of the FTEs, the positions that have been added since FY17. You'll see kind of a bulleted list here, and most of them, when you look at the story that this list tells, it really tells us that we have, since going back to FY17, been required, expected to meet the growing social emotional needs of kids, the mental health needs of kids, to make sure that they're ready for learning, to make sure that they're available for learning. And so these have been really critical investments that we have made, and frankly, most school districts have had to make, again, to be sure that we're addressing the needs of the whole child and to be sure that they are ready to learn. And so these are some of the critical investments that we've made and that have resulted in more robust programming, expanded services to students in Long Meadow Public Schools. Happy to get any questions about anything on that list. Happy to take a peek. All right. Now that sort of perhaps a slide that maybe is the densest slide and provides us with the most information. This is, I'll start with, you'll see how it results in, or it boils down to that $327,000 reduction in the overall FY23 recommended budget. You'll see that we have a set aside to meet our contractual obligations. I'll work on the addition side first, on the right-hand side. On district tuitions, we have, again, a growing, students with acute needs, and we need to be sure that we're serving those students. And so we need to account for that with a increased commitment to out-of-district tuitions. We talked earlier about adding a school psychologist to provide evaluation services to students, and I would draw your attention to that $52,000. It sort of connects on the left-hand side a reduction in evaluation expenses. So, if I were to draw an arrow between the $52,000 investment we're making in the school psychologist and the reduction in contractual services, evaluation expenses, in pupil services, those two things tied together. This budget would institutionalize, would fold in the RBTs, the registered behavior technicians that were introduced this school year. And these are, again, positions that help us implement critical behavior plans for students across all the grades, but mostly at the elementary level. This position would, as we had plotted out, again, going back to last year and sort of accounted for in the spring, this position would introduce a K-5 special education supervisor. This position is needed because the special education supervisors that were in place at each elementary school have been replaced by assistant principals at each of the three schools. So we're excited for this position. We think that it will ensure consistency of services, pupil services across all three elementary schools. We think that it will lead to consistency in terms of eligibility requirements and eligibility expectations and meeting practices. So it's a welcome step forward for us. Looking at a few other items, you'll see that when we need to add kindergarten sections, we need to add kindergarten assistants to go with that. That's the $41,932. The athletic trainer is incorporated into this budget. Transportation, really, it's really just the cost of doing business, increased fuel and transportation costs associated with that. And Mr. Mauser can explain the $71 miscellaneous increase there for us. Attrition, this is a number that it relates to the savings that we would achieve when great teachers retire and they're replaced with folks who come to us lower on the salary schedule. So based on the retirements that we currently know, we think there'll be around $401,000 in savings associated with that. The $670,000 reduction in instructional supports and materials, again, I would tie that back to, if I could just flash back to it, I'd tie that back to this list. Next year, we won't be renting tents. We hope we're not buying PPE. We hope that we're not going to need any additional desks or HVAC supply. All those things that helped us get us over the hump of this pandemic will not be necessary next year. And so that's where that $670,000 reduction comes from. It's an eye-popping number, but you really need to think about it in the context of the pandemic. Specialist teachers, you'll recall that we added, with the committee's encouragement, 4 regular ed academic interventionists at the 2 middle schools, 2 at Glenbrook, 2 at Williams. We were able to retain 1 at Glenbrook and 1 at Williams, but this position would reduce 2 of the 4. Again, those were positions that were added with the sort of one-time ESSER funds, and it's really the responsible, right thing to do to pull back on the positions that we need to. You'll see the reduction associated with the special education supervisors. We'll explain that. The $50,000 tied to the elimination of contracted services for the school psychologists. Transition support, people services, I might need Mr. Mazza's help on that. Legal settlements, we're better positioned in a place where we can reduce the allocation to legal settlements. 8th grade staff in Williams, that's the bubble group that is making its way to the high school, and so there's some savings associated with that. And we also think that we will be able to reduce staffing at the high school in response to declining enrollment at the high school. So our hope and anticipation would be that that's not going to have a negative effect on class size, but that's always to be determined. We always wait for signups to see how that shakes out, but it's a reasonable response to a slight decline in enrollment at the high school in recent years. Right. So moving forward, there are some things that we want to continue to kind of keep our eyes on. I at the risk of sounding like a broken record, there are a lot of unknowns on the school side and the town side. This is the first opportunity for the committee to review the recommendation. We will meet again on February 8th, and the committee potentially could vote on the budget on February 15th. So our next few Tuesdays are busy ones, but there are certainly some things that we're going to keep our eye on. We had talked for a couple of years now about the value that math coaches would provide at the elementary level. Unfortunately, this budget does not provide for introduction of math coaches at the elementary level, but we know that we need some math leadership at the elementary level. We're piloting a series currently, and we'll implement next year. We want to make sure that teachers get the appropriate support that they need, that there's opportunities for someone to provide professional development and some modeling and some coaching. And so that might be something that we'll want to kind of sort of keep at the top of the priority list if we're in a position to implement some math leadership at the elementary level. K enrollments, section enrollments, always things we keep our eyes on. Support for at-risk students. It is, I know it's known to this committee, but worth saying publicly that Long Meadow Public Schools and schools across America are dealing with children who are in the midst of a mental health crisis. And again, I would say that a lot of the signs of that were apparent to us pre-pandemic and perhaps accelerated by the pandemic, but we want to make sure that we're providing support to students who are at risk and that's something that those needs are sometimes difficult to predict, and they're very much individualized. OT services, we'll need to continue to make sure that we're meeting our OT obligations. And then the regular ed academic interventionists. So we had, I think if we were able to implement that this year, 2 and 2 at each school, and we think they worked out very well. And it's something that is part of that MTSS tiered systems of support model that we want to kind of keep our eyes on. And so finally, here's what's coming up. Public hearing next week. If there are community members that would like to learn more, we will re-present the budget, perhaps based on feedback that we get from the committee tonight. And then another opportunity on the 15th for the committee to review and deliberate on the budget and potentially vote. And then tentatively, we have set aside February 22nd as an opportunity to present the budget to the Select Board and Finance Committee. I think that typically would just involve Tom and I and 1 or 2 members of the committee, so that's not a full committee meeting. And this ultimately leads to the Select Board voting a budget for town meeting on 13th. And then finally, nothing gets locked in until the annual town meeting on May 10th. I always say, even after that date, the size of the pie has been established and voted, but there's always opportunities to think differently about the allocations within that. So thanks for everybody's long attention span, and appreciate the chance to present a budget that we're proud of and we think gets some important targets for us for next year.
Thank you, Marty, for going through all that, and thanks to Marty and everybody on the admin team. A big shout out to Tom Mazda, who I know put in a huge amount of work to get this ready to go. So thank you to everybody involved, and of course our administrators are here too, and I know they're a big part of that. So now it is time for the committee. What questions do you have for Marty and the administrative team about the budget? And again, just to remind members of the public who are on the call or watching this whenever you're watching it, next week, the public hearing, that's the opportunity for the public to weigh in on their thoughts on the budget. So this is the committee's opportunity, and then next week we will hear what folks in the public want to say about the budget. So committee members, where would you like to start? Susie, you get to lead us off.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. O'Shea, and thank you, Tom, and thank you to the Finance Subcommittee for all your due diligence, for sure, in this. And I just have a couple of questions. I appreciate the emphasis that you're making to maintain our staffing levels where they are, but understand that, we have to also consider pulling back where we're not going to receive funding anymore. So thank you for that. I would certainly advocate for, any kind of specialists or coaches positions, if possible, to be maintained. As you pointed out, when you're instituting a new series math program at the elementary level, it does require a lot of all hands on deck to support that. So as much emphasis as we can would be great. A couple of questions. The first one being, there's two. I was trying to find where I know we said elementary, it's a wash. There's 64 sections this year. There'll be 64 sections next year. But you also mentioned, Dr. O'Shea, that we're adding 2 kindergarten sections. And I don't see the addition of those sections in the additions and increases. I just see the addition of the assistants.
So the reason is, we have 5th grade sections that are heading off to 6th grade, and so in terms of staffing levels, it'll be a wash.
Okay.
So it won't represent an increase to overall staffing. The only increase would be tied to the additional K assistants needed for the additional K sections. So 2 additional K sections are offset by a decline of 2 5th grade sections heading into 6th grade. Is that all right, Don?
Yeah, we normally, with the rising 5th to 6th, we usually have the opportunity to reduce the section for the incoming kindergarten.
Right.
In this case, we were not.
Okay.
So it's really maintaining the sections.
Right.
Blueberry only had 3 in this current year. We are adding the 4th that is currently in 5th grade to the kindergarten. It might not end up at Blueberry, it may end up at Wolf Swamp. We don't know exactly where the enrollment will end up, but I think it's unfortunately, it's an opportunity to maintain those sections with the expectation of an increase in enrollment in kindergarten.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate that. The next question I have is about the reduction of the 8th grade staffing at Williams Middle School. Given that there's that, potential real big bubble at Glenbrook, would we be smart to maintain that 0.8 in the budget to then apply to Glenbrook instead? Just from the standpoint of, 24.82 or whatever it was is a pretty high number. So I don't know if that's...
Yeah, and I think we would be especially concerned if that 24 turned into 25, 26, right? And it's frankly, it's likely. So I think we will have to respond to that bubble in Glenbrook. The question is, how much internal capacity will we have? Are there folks that are already employed that could be reassigned, or will take down additional sections? Or would we have to go outside and hire for additional sections? I think that's where, we probably turn to Tom to say, once we pin down what the need is, how might we find the allocation for that? And that's something that...
Yeah, I do agree. I think we are going to have to address it at some point. I think the challenge with one additional section in each subject makes it very difficult from a staffing perspective, at least from an FTE perspective. Based on that, it'll be in 8th grade next year. I would probably recommend maybe school choice to address whatever increased costs to provide those smaller class sizes, knowing that it'll be a 1-year investment with those students rising to the high school and won't need to maintain that staffing solution after next year.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So the 0.8 FTE reduction at Williams is in maybe just one subject area? Oh, it's in 2 certain areas? Okay. But certainly not a sufficient number to offset. Okay, got it. Thank you. And then 2 more. The psychologist, pupil services. So I'm aware that the current model is that these are district level psychologists. Is there ever been any talk of school-based or level-based psychologists that do a little bit more in terms of supporting students directly, in the schools?
Let's see if Jean Fontaine is on the call. If that's on.
Just from the social emotional perspective, that all hands on deck.
Yeah, having them sort of embedded in the building, and we certainly have had some conversations on that. This budget wouldn't rule that out. They could potentially be placed in the buildings, but we have not advanced any planning on that for FY23. But Jean, I don't know if you want to hit that at all or speak to that.
Yeah, I think ideally that would be a great plan. I don't think we're in a position to do that next year just due to the amount of assessments that we're doing. So we actually have 2 full-time school psychologists. We have a full-time intern this year with us who is also testing, and then we contract for an additional 2.5 days of testing, and we are just keeping up with our timelines. So I don't expect to see a huge relief in that in the near future. So really, we need the additional assessment right now. Moving forward, I would love to be able to explore that, to have school-based school psychologists that can do more consulting to teachers, to teaching teams, and get more into the SEL. But right now, we're still doing an awful lot of evaluation.
Thank you for that. I think that model is so helpful. Really get to know the kids when you're based in a school, and you get to know the educators who are working with them a lot more closely. So advocate for that, but I understand the constraints for sure.
Yeah, I don't think we could cover the whole district with 3 FTE. We'd need to be looking at more of an investment, but it's definitely something we have talked about, but it would be a real shift in that job. But I'm certainly open to exploring it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then the last one was that I just was curious about the special education supervisor for K to 5. Is that going to be an administrator or a teacher?
That would be a Unit A position.
Unit A.
Yeah, it would mirror the existing special education supervisors.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So the question is would it be an administrative position or a teaching supervising position? So the Unit A contract is the teaching contract, and so that recognizes special education supervisor. So
that's all for now.
Thank you, Susie. I can see everyone. Who would like to jump in next? Mary, I see your hand up. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. Marty, I'm wondering if you would mind scrolling to the non-retained pandemic response investments.
Oh, yeah.
I was curious about the positions, the preschool registered behavior technicians, the middle school interventionists, and the part-time school adjustment counselor. Would we eliminate those because they're no longer needed? I understand that they were hired because of the pandemic or because of the pandemic response, but I'm curious about those interventionists, what they're doing, and why that wouldn't be needed anymore. And
yeah, we would love to retain those. I think, if we had the opportunity, they did amazing work, and the needs of children in those areas are really significant. The additional contracted .4 school adjustment counselor along the high has been very, very busy and responding to some really acute mental health needs of children at that age level. The 2 middle school interventionists, you'll recall we added an ELA and a math position at both Glenbrook and Williams. And so instead of the 4 that we currently have, these are regular ed academic interventions. Next year we would be down to 2. I think our principals would tell you, and I would agree that these have been valuable positions, and if we were in a position to realistically retain them, we would like that opportunity. But we're also trying to be sort of mindful of some of the constraints, the very real fiscal constraints that are before us, that are in front of the town, and the RBTs, same thing. They've been great in terms of implementing those behavior plans, and that the preschool success of the preschool model was something that encouraged us to think about retaining 2 RBTs for next year. I wonder if I'm asking Sue or Jean, that the RBTs that we would have in place for next year, would they be able to serve the preschool? Do you see that happening?
I think Jean has them going where she needs them, right, Jean, relative to student needs?
Yeah, so it's actually a little bit different. The preschool RBT is a contracted employee right now is only with us about 10 hours a week, and she's really working on developing programs for the discrete trial teaching, which is a different kind of intervention than the 2 RBTs are doing in the elementary schools. So we were able to fund that preschool RBT through an additional American Rescue grant. I haven't ruled out that we may be able to if the special ed funding came in higher, like our IDEA grant or our early childhood grant. We would look at potentially doing that again, but because it has been a nice support for programming. But I don't think the elementary could absorb that. We're hoping to grow the elementary RBTs into the middle schools next year.
I'm thinking about Susie's comment a few moments ago about the instructional coaches at the elementary level, and I think I've said before to this group that I'm very supportive of those types of positions, coaches, interventionists. I still think that the middle school, having coaches at the middle schools, and I know that money obviously is a constraint, is something that I would be interested in learning more about maybe in future years. But if there's any possibility of keeping interventionists there, I would be interested in learning more about that. And I do notice our give back numbers are significant in some years, and I know that in recent years we've received a lot of ESSER funding. Schools have been opened and closed, and there's been savings associated with the buildings not being open full time because of COVID. But even in years prior to COVID, I was interested to see just how much money we do turn back. So that's all. Just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Other comments or questions? Dugan.
So I have a comment. As a student representative, I don't think I would be doing my due diligence if I did not thank the Finance Subcommittee, Dr. O'Shea, and the administration team for your continued commitment and support of student mental health. I can say as a student of LHS and of LPS schools, I've had so much good fortune to be able to work with so great individuals to support personally my mental health and the mental health of my peers. So I thank you for your commitment to student mental health, your funding towards mental health, and your continued support and success of student mental health.
Thank you, Dave. And I do know that we had an excellent conversation, as Marty said, on the Finance Subcommittee. So that was Jamie, Bronwyn, and me. And so part of the reason I think why the three of us don't have a lot of comments and questions, we had a lot of comments and questions on Friday morning. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't have a question. I just had a comment similar to what Mary was talking about. This is now only my third budget cycle with being on the school committee, and I just appreciate that y'all put that column in there, the general fund Turnbacks, because again, in thinking towards, it seems like this, for me anyway, this process gets a little more challenging and, a lot more deeper conversations as the years go on. And I know that this one's going to be definitely, again, I'm speaking for myself, but the most challenging. And so I think, again, I appreciate the opportunity to look back historically and see the fiscal responsibility. Like it is, that we've been able to turn back money. And again, I think that's a reflection of the planning, the puzzle piecing, and all the other stuff that goes into this. So I just wanted to thank y'all for including that, because it's a reminder for me as this gets more challenging that it's been, y'all been doing a great job. So thank you.
Gianna? I have a couple of questions. I'll jump in here and let other people think if they have other questions. So, Marty, can you just go back to the school enrollment numbers? Because I just was confused. Like, there were two columns, and I couldn't tell the difference between. They looked exactly the same. So any of them, like I'll go to Blueberry. Yeah. There's those two columns that are approved and estimated, and they look to be. Oh, here they're different. Okay. So there's a couple of spots. I guess that's what I was trying to figure out, because at least on some of them they looked identical. Yeah. So, and that sort of getting to your point that, like, in general, there's very little movement between last year or this year and the next year. Am I understanding that correctly?
Overall, the net number section at the elementary level is the same. So we're
right, but I think that if you go, you would mention there were a couple of changes. If you go up to Blueberry, there was at least one that changed, and that was getting at Tom's point that a fifth grade section is getting reduced somewhere, and the kindergarten section is getting added somewhere. Right? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I just didn't look closely enough because it looked like they were identical the whole way through. All right. Can you? I appreciated already in the beginning you talking about the Chapter 70 funds. Can you just talk to us a little bit about, like, we don't control those funds, right? So you talked about how there's an increase in the Chapter 70 funds to the town, but that goes to the town, not to the school budget, right? So when you're showing those numbers, it's not saying like, oh, our budget in the schools is going to get increased by $736,000. Instead, the allotment that goes to the town.
Yeah.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Perfectly. That's a really good clarification, that Chapter 78 goes to the town, and in fairness, always worth noting that the town funds us well above than what they're minimally required to fund us at. So that foundation budget establishes that amount that sort of we minimally ought to spend on educating Long Meadow Public School students. But of course, with grants and with contributions from the town, we go well beyond that. The 736 will hopefully provide some relief to the town. And not just this year, it's really worth noting that this is going to, I would say, build the Chapter 70 base, and so that future Chapter 70 increments will be built on top of this. So I think it's not only welcome news for FY23, I think it's welcome news for, the sort of the challenges that the town will face as it approaches that tax ceiling that we've talked about. So that's definitely worth noting, is that Chapter 78 does not come directly to the school, it goes to the town.
Thank you for clarifying that. And one other sort of big picture thing, and I don't know if you or Tom want to take this, but I just think it's important for the committee and the town to understand that while we're in the middle of negotiating contracts, it's possible that the contract we come out with is different than what our budget assumption is. And I just hope that one of you can just talk about what happens if those numbers aren't the same, because I think that's an issue that everybody is thinking about, and I'm not sure we all understand what happens if those numbers are different than what they happen to be in the budget.
Okay.
I think assuming we built the budget based on an assumption, looking at historical trends, a number of other factors. If we are unable to reach that level in terms of increases for our contractual obligations, we would have to come back and assess where can we find opportunities, either through additional attrition. I think as the superintendent said at the beginning, there are still a number of factors that aren't known to us. I built in the attrition that we know of right now. Today's February 1st. We have 7-8 months before this budget will be implemented in terms of school opening. So there certainly will be additional changes in terms of staffing. So there could be some opportunity there. Again, depending upon how wide that difference is, would really, I think, determine which strategy we might have to consider. But we would definitely have to revisit it and look at what can we do within the budget that was approved, and try to reconcile that. And potentially, if it's a large enough gap, we might have to consider other options in terms of staffing and/or request for additional funds.
And again, I want to make sure that we all understand logistically what that means, right? So we're presenting this budget. If this is the budget we approve in 2 weeks' time, and that gets approved by the town and at town meeting, then that's our budget. That's the money we have. And if we spend more in one area, we have to spend less in another area, and Tom guides us through that. But am I right that we can also request additional funding at a town meeting, or is it like that's what you get and you need to figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, again, depending upon when this all occurs, we obviously could always go to town meeting for additional appropriation. It would have to come from reserves or other possibly free cash. It is not considered best practice to use one-time revenues towards recurring expenses. So that obviously would be a challenge for future budget developments, but that opportunity would exist. I don't know that we've had to do that in the past, and it certainly wouldn't be an option I would hope we have to employ in the future.
Yeah, so I think just to interpret what you're saying, Tom, is the general way this works is some budget will get approved at town meeting, and that's the money we have, and we have to live within that budget. Okay. Thanks. Other comments or questions from the committee? Please.
My last question is just about, and again, the implications at the town level, because of that slide you included from our previous meeting with the finance committee and the select board. It's my understanding that, on that slide, the most that the town kind of projected was a potential 2.5% increase overall for their budget, but that wasn't the recommended one. And we're asking, and I'm understanding that we actually the schools occupy a great deal of the town budget. We take up more than 50% of the budget. It's more like 70% almost. So us coming in at 3% obviously poses a real strain on the rest of the town services, and what their goals are for their budget. So you noted before, Dr. O'Shea, very real fiscal constraints, right? So I guess the challenge I'm faced with is I want all of these things and more for our schools, but I also know that a 3% increase might not be approved.
Yes.
So I just wanted to be realistic about that, just given what the context is coming from.
So I nail on the head. I think you're absolutely, and I know that sentiment will be appreciated by Finance Committee, Select Board, and I think it's our job now is to understand what impact this will have on the town. This slide was from December 6th, and that's before they had pinned down many of their costs, right? Retiree health insurance, their attrition numbers, their contract obligations. So really now we have to go back and say, all right, how does our piece of the puzzle fit, and how does it fit? And we always want to work in partnership and kind of recognize the constraints that the town, the really real constraints that the town is facing. So I think that setting that wider context is really key. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you, Susie. Are there other comments and questions, Marty, if you could take them back to the gallery? Sorry. Mary, go ahead.
Well, I just totally agree with Susie that everything I see, I think we should do that too. We should do that too. And I guess I just, some of those positions that we were discussing a little bit earlier, it's sometimes difficult to see the impact that they can have because those support positions are not necessarily folks who are directly working with students every day, but I really think that they have an impact on instruction. And so when we think about how important some of the positions are, like you think about work behaviorists do, you think about work interventionists do, those kinds of positions are easy to overlook because I don't think that their impact is always really, really obvious. But I think when you have good people in positions like that, over time, it really does affect the quality of education. So I just want to say that, yes, Susie, I also want to fund everything. So there you have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Marty, go ahead.
I don't know if it would be to follow up on what Mary said. Would the committee want to hear from any of the principals, sort of anecdotally, about the benefit of those behaviors, as Mary framed it, behaviorists, the interventionists, the coaches? I don't know if any of the principals want to weigh in on the value that those service providers provide to our students.
Yeah, I think that would be fair.
They might be quiet and shy, putting them on the spot. Amy, go for it, Amy. Oh, look at that on me. There you go.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'll speak to the coaches, the math coaches. It's been mentioned how impactful that is for our staff. certainly at the elementary level, particularly with onboarding a brand new math program. I think making sure that we can implement the program with fidelity is really important, and those math coaches, we had hoped and we still hope would be part of that equation for us. That's a big undertaking. Having one coach at all 3 schools was an idea that we talked about. Principal Hutton can speak to this a little better than I can, because before my time that was done, and it was not very effective. I think that's close to an impossible job, 1 coach, 3 buildings. So, that would, I think, be on the top of our wish list for elementary, recognizing all of the budget constraints. So just wanted to put that into perspective. It's been mentioned, but I think we concur with that position very strongly for our elementary level.
Thank you, Amy. No.
Hi.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we would love to keep the 2 that we have in each building. We see that it's super valuable. Our writing interventionist specialist is, she's great. She is working with each grade level. She rotates through. It's too hard to rotate and stay on top of 3 different grade level curriculums on a daily basis. So she rotates every week through a different grade. And the teachers absolutely love having her in the class. She started in November, and, conferencing with the kids, being able to do some small group work, really focusing on the writing, and the teachers know when she's coming, so they're prepared on what they're going to have her be able to help with. So we've seen a lot of value in the writing specialists that we have.
That's cool. Any other comments or questions? All right. So I think just a reminder to the committee of the dates. So Marty, if you don't mind showing that slide again. So we've got the public hearing a week from today. So again, that's, sorry about that. We're all good. A week from today, and then the committee would vote on the budget in 2 weeks from today. Come on, somebody get there. There we go. Next steps. There we go. All right, so again, it's public hearing. So again, members of the public, if you want to weigh in on the budget, we still have to hear from you next week as it's done good, or feel free to email us if that doesn't work out for you. And then the school committee votes on the budget 2 weeks from today, and then we will present that budget to the select board and the finance committee on February 22nd. And I think the assumption is that Jamie, as chair of our finance subcommittee, and myself as chair of the committee, will go to that as school committee representatives, so that not everybody has to go. And then of course Tom and Marty will be there. So I just want to make sure that the committee is good with that schedule. Are there any, it looks like we're good in this room. Are there any questions from folks not in this room about that schedule? Okay, excellent. All right, so I think we might be ready to move on, in which case we definitely want to thank everybody who joined us. It's great to have all of you. It's great to see you on the screen. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I hope that we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Edmund. Have a good night.
Right. The owl cannot hear you wave. All right, so we're on to administrative reports. Marty?
Nothing tonight.
All right, assistant superintendents. All right, school committee chair report is exactly the same as those reports, which is nothing. Dugan.
I want to break the silence from it,
Yes, do it.
as I would do. So, one, to start off, congratulations. We got through midterms, all unscathed, hopefully. With me, it was rough. Waking up, going to those tasks, favorite thing in the world. Next thing is the LHS Pops concert is going to be on the 10th of February, next week. For all our music students, concert week next week. Good luck. For myself and my ensemble will be performing. So I believe it also will be broadcasted on LCTV. So give it a watch, give it a listen. Great musicians out at LHS will be performing at that concert. And finally, just because midterm did just happen, we're on the start of a new semester. So I give some LHS students some advice that I give in all of my leadership talks, whether that be in scouting, future in the military, and all other walks of life and leadership that I hold. With new things and new opportunities, do not squander those opportunities. If you are given an opportunity to do anything of any importance, at any level, take it and do not squander that opportunity, because you don't know at what point down the road you're gonna wish you took that opportunity. And my second thing, which I tell all my friends, just do the work. It's worth it in the end. The hard thing might be now, but it will pay off in the end, and I can guarantee that you will see those dividends. So that's all I have to leave you with.
Thank you, Dugan. Other reports, LPVC, Mary.
No report. The next meeting is on February 16th. And I know I mentioned this in the shout outs, but I was very impressed with our open house this evening.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. No report from Energy and Sustainability. Jenna, Seal.
Thanks, Kevin. So I just wanted to continue to express my encouragement. Please check out Special Education Alliance of Long Meadow. Engage with them. Go to the website, sealma.org. Please, you can check in. You can see what kind of resources are available, supporting that's available, networking. And again, as I've also mentioned, ways that you can contribute, even if your child is not requiring of special education needs. So sealma.org.
Thank you, Gianna. Any tax ceiling update? No. Okay. All right. We are on to subcommittee reports. You've heard everything we talked about at the finance subcommittee because we met on Friday, as we mentioned. No other subcommittee reports. So we are to ongoing business. And I'm going to give it over to Marty for COVID protocols, planning for next steps.
So the intention of this agenda item is I think, to signal to the community, or at least administratively, our readiness to think about next steps. We do recognize that things are trending in the right direction. We acknowledge that the DESE mask mandate looks like it will expire on February 28th. We have initiated a new testing program. We're seeing our numbers come down. In fact, today we're down to 9 active, it was actually as of yesterday, 9 active student cases, which we were at 60 something in early January. So that's really encouraging news. So I think we're ready to kind of bring the band back together to think about what our next steps will be. We have on February 8th, a meeting that kind of a working meeting of some school administrators, school health officials. I'd love to have school committee represented, a member represented at that meeting. We'll have our one or both of our consulting physicians will be there. And that's on February 8th. The thought is that it would put the committee in a position to kind of perhaps take some steps, make some decisions at your February 15th meeting. I wanted to alert the committee to that, but also if there's anything that the committee, you also have another meeting on the 8th. So if there's any information you need or anything you want to take up at that meeting, we're kind of ready to do the planning and legwork that needs to happen to put the committee in a position to make the right decision for us, and also administratively to really think about, we've always thought about that continuum, and there are times where we've got to be more restrictive, there are times where we could be less restrictive, and I think it appears, if things continue to trend in the right direction, that we're going to be in a position to be less restrictive in some regards. Now, what that means is to be determined by discussions with the committee and discussions with the team that I described that's going together on February 8th. So if there's any information that the committee needs, if there's anything that you want us to work on, we're ready to do that work to kind of be in a position at least to respond to the what looks like DESE will appears they're going to pull back on that mask mandate on February 28th. I haven't heard anything that date is changing. I haven't heard that they're going to do it sooner. I haven't heard that they're doing it later. And today, anyways, it was quiet.
Marty, can you just remind us the time of that February 8th meeting?
All of these at 4 o'clock, I think. So then it's in the afternoon. 4 o'clock.
So I guess we can have any discussion we want on this. I think the first thing I want to do before I forget is if anybody wants to go to that February 8th meeting at 4, I would say to the committee, I'm happy to represent us, but I'm also happy to not represent us if somebody else really wants to go. So
if you wanted, it could be 2 committee members as well.
Okay. Does anybody else want to attend that meeting February 8th at 4?
We need to let you know right now.
Only you wouldn't have to unless there's any, I think ultimately Kevin would need to appoint. If there were more than 2 members who want to, I would probably turn to Kevin to identify or appoint the 2 who would attend.
Okay, just because I'm thinking one of our members is not present.
That's right.
Yes, that's true. So we can send out maybe Marty, you can send an email to the members and just ask who is interested.
Yeah.
And then we can go from there.
Yeah.
Because I think our end goal is to have 2 people there, at least 1. And then maybe, yeah.
So let me know if that's something that you're interested in, and then I'll circle back with Kevin to pin it down.
Perfect. Let's go to questions. And I see that Mary has her hand up. So Mary, go ahead and start us off.
Could you just repeat the time of that meeting on February 8th? Or did you say it was February 8th?
I think it's 4 o'clock. Yeah.
4 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's before our school committee meeting, which is that day for the budget. Yeah. So questions, comments on thinking for the future. I see Bronwyn. Let's do Bronwyn and then James.
Oh, thanks. Marty, I was just wondering, it's a little bit confusing with DESE. So as of February 28th, they're going to be like hands off and let the Board of Health in each district or the school committee decide what they're going to do. Between now and then, is it still an option for schools to be mask optional if they're at 80%?
So yes, that still is an option. If you're at that 80% level, schools could still go mask optional. What changed since we did it in the fall, and this might be something that will be news that's well received to some, and others might be hesitant to hear this, but the DESE guidance now says that if you exercise that 80% off ramp, that the mask requirement, it's mask optional for all, and unvaccinated individuals, for them, it's only highly recommended that they continue to mask. It would, for DESE anyways, there's no requirement that unvaccinated individuals remain masked if a school exercises that 80% option. So that's different from the way we did it the first 2 weeks of December.
So does that require, would that require if a new discussion in motion, or is that something that you're still setting the dates on.
I think I probably, that's a great question. I think I defer to the committee on how if you wanted to give me that discretion or if you wanted to make that subject to a vote. My initial thought is that it ought to be subject to committee deliberation because the terms that you approved the original plan on have changed. In other words, when you approved it back in November, it was for vaccinated individuals to continue to remain masked, and now we would be approaching it differently. It would be unvaccinated. It would only be highly recommended that unvaccinated individuals continue to mask. So I think it's something that I probably would want to bring back to the committee on February 8th. We do it on the 8th or 15th or whatever.
Well, and the timing on the 8th would be good because we would have that meeting with folks from the Board of Health and our consulting physicians, and so we could put that to them directly before the school committee meeting later that day. Bronwyn, keep going if you want.
No, that's fine. I wish it wasn't a week away because then we have, when's February vacation?
Later this year, it starts Monday the 21st.
Okay, so there still might be an opportunity at the meeting next week to talk about possibly exploring that option for, is it just still the high school or did either middle school get to 80%?
The middle schools, we have begun to kind of do the data mining to understand what the vaccination levels of our middle school students were. So just like last time, we're seeing a gap between the aggregate town reports and what we're seeing in our own immunization databases. So Nurse Gartman has started to find out what the actual vaccination levels are at the middle school. So if that's something, if you wanted us to do that legwork, we could probably pull that off before the meeting on the 8th.
Well, yeah, I think it's something that if we're close, which I think the last time you showed the numbers, we were fairly close, but those are definitely numbers that I personally would like to see as a committee member. I'd like to see them updated as we have meetings. I guess unless we make any changes. What was the last time we met? What were those numbers that you gave us?
I had shown the aggregate numbers. I had shown the numbers for the entire town. So the 12 to, I forget how broken out, 12 to 15 age group, and then the 16 to 19 age group. And 12 to 15 was over 80%. I don't remember the exact number. And so, again, we have to figure out a way to verify if our actual students are actually at that level. Yeah.
Okay, so we can do that before next week. Hopefully, maybe just the same way we did the high school. I personally would like to see those numbers. So if we need to make any decisions, we have the data. So thank you.
So if it's all right, I just want to follow up briefly on what Bronwyn just said. So Marty, it sounds like it might not be possible to know that like this week, right? Like I guess I'm curious, like if you knew that we were over the 80% for the middle schools, you would still need to submit that to the state. Like is that process still the same?
I'm trying to recall, and I wish maybe my friends could help me here, but I'm trying to recall if when we submitted it, we did it as a district or for a school. I believe we did it for a school.
I thought it was for a school.
Yeah, right? So we would have to go through that process. They turn it around really quickly for us when we submitted at the high school. And, we could do our best to get them to evaluate our submission.
And I guess I'm curious, like if you know that number is over 80% before our next meeting, is there any reason to wait for our next meeting to submit that to the state?
No.
Okay.
If I know that before your next meeting,
Right.
I will say I may not know that by Friday. Again, it's a pretty labor-intensive thing where, if you recall, we sent an email out to all the high school families saying to those families that we didn't have a vaccination record on, and said, hey, our records are showing that we don't have a vaccination record. Is this correct? And so we did, number one, identify the students, to develop the forms, send it off to parents, get the feedback, send the request off to DESE, have them confirm it. And then the other thing, I would say that one of the reasons that I felt we could do it successfully in the high school is the sort of monitoring and enforceability. And, I just want to be upfront that that's something that I would want to evaluate. When we did the trial period at the high school, having discussed it with, Tom Landers and his team, felt really strongly that they were in a position to monitor and enforce it. And I would want to have that same confidence. I'm not saying we won't, but I just want to have that same confidence that it wouldn't be disruptive to the middle school.
Sure.
Honestly, I'd like to get to us to a point where it's optional for all. I'll just say it. I think that's. I'm hoping.
I don't think we need to wait till the end of February if our middle schools are at 80% and the committee voted for mask optional. I also think that if it's been the same way the whole time, then our numbers should be getting updated each week. For us not, for you guys not to have the vaccination percentages for us, grade-wise, it doesn't make any sense to me, seeing that DESE hasn't changed that rule is still in place. If you're at 80%, it could be mask optional. So I feel like, I'm not sure why you guys haven't been keeping up with that data each week, instead of waiting and then saying like, well, I'll try to get it for the next meeting, but I don't know if I can.
But to be clear, we keep up, we have access to it. It's whether or not families provide us with,
have you asked the families?
The provide families for a vaccination to show up in the immunization database, the nurses review, the provider where they got the vaccination would have to work with the family to have the family issue consent for the family to have that vaccination record go into that immunization database. So it's a matter of sort of we regularly work with families if we do not have a vaccination record, and that comes up pretty regularly because our nurses have to, in close contact situations or in situations where students have COVID, they reach out to families to find out if in fact the child was vaccinated. So that does happen regularly.
Okay, but you don't have the numbers for us. I'm having a hard time with that. I'm super frustrated by that because DESE's had this in place. I mean, this could be something that we could vote on tonight if you had the numbers for us. I don't understand why it's just kind of like, we have some numbers by age group, which doesn't help us at all. So you're putting us in a position where we can't really do our job because we don't have the numbers that we need. And I find that very frustrating.
Yeah, DESE has been, kind of a moving target, as we all know, right? I mean,
they haven't changed their mind on that. It's been...
no, they did. They changed, they issued an advisory on January 10th that changed the terms of what unvaccinated individuals would have to do if schools exercise that off-ramp. So it's different than it was.
The 80% has remained the same the whole time.
The 80% has remained the same, but the requirement for unvaccinated individuals has changed. And the other thing that's happened is in the last couple of weeks has been the shift to this pre-K to 12 testing program, and that's been the focus of our nurses and our administrative teams. So, I mean,
Okay, I think that's great. I appreciate everyone's doing all that work. I'm saying that if you guys are keeping up with this the whole time, I mean, this discussion started in like late November, I think. This February. So if we were keeping up with this the whole time, you would have those numbers for us tonight, and we could possibly take action. So, as I said, I'm just extremely frustrated that you have no idea where the numbers are for our middle schools. So, I definitely hope that you have those by next week.
Yeah, it would be, if that's the direction of the committee, we'll have them for next week.
And just I looked up the numbers that Marty presented last time, and just again to remind everybody, 16 to 19-year-olds, 84% fully vaccinated, 12 to 15-year-olds, 91% fully vaccinated. And again, I get that that's not directly related to the students who are in our schools, but it bodes well for us having greater than 80% vaccinated in both of the middle schools. Jamie, please.
Yep, I guess my question, I don't know why we're not acting on it tonight anyways. I mean, without those numbers, I mean, I'm kind of saying that if we did the same thing we did with the high school, is put it in Marty's hands. If we look at this holistically, if any of our schools are above the 80%, we want him applying for it tomorrow, if that's the case, to get this rolling versus sitting here and waiting a whole another week. I've been saying the same thing all along. I'm not getting into the debate, mask, no mask. I have no clue. There's so many different opinions on it. The one thing I am 100% confident on is every day that the kid has a mask in school, it's affecting their education. We're responsible for the education of the students. Health and well-being, it's really, really important, but the health department can step up, and if we're going a wrong direction, they can jump in and bypass us if they want. The reality is we're missing an opportunity for the kids' education, and I truly think we've set many of these kids back because of what we had to do. In a lot of cases, I think we're kind of getting past that point where we need to about face and make a change for the kids and for the students. And I think it's going to be better for the teachers as well. So I think we should be doing this tonight and given the authority based on whether we're at 80% at any of these schools, start moving forward. Don't let another week go by because I think it's just not right for the students. It just is not right.
So, Jamie, let me make sure I'm understanding your comment. I think that you're saying that if we know as soon as possible that we're at 80% for the middle schools, we should submit that to the state so we can get. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like we could be at 80% at every school right now. Marty could figure that out tomorrow morning. Yeah, we're going to wait another week of kind of fumbling around. I'd rather just kind of give the authority and let's make the right decision for what we think we want to do, even though we don't have all the information just yet. If the information hits the numbers based off of whatever we talk about or whatever motion's out there, then obviously Marty can move forward. If it's not, he can't.
Well, and I think, Marty, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have given you the authority to submit that 80% attestation at the middle schools if you knew that on Thursday, which again, I want to be respectful of, I know we might not know that by Thursday, but if we did, there's no reason you couldn't submit that, right? Yeah. Okay, so I think that addresses your point, Jamie. If we know for certain we can submit that before our next meeting, and then potentially we could act on it at our next meeting, because we don't have to wait to submit. Right? Is that answering the question?
That is, and I feel like I gave, whenever I voted last time, I know some of the rules maybe have changed, but I gave authority for the high school already. I don't think we have to re-vote on that based off of our previous meeting notes and what we discussed. I mean, we gave a lot of autonomy to Marty and the administration to make the right decision for the high school students. So I don't even think we need to discuss the high school, in my opinion, based off of what I remember from that meeting, because it was a pretty detailed meeting about what authority we want to give and not give. I would say if Marty wanted to send out an email tomorrow to open up the school, at the high school, the way he sees fit, it's appropriate. Not that I'm saying that is, but whatever way he sees fit, he could do that based off of the authority we gave him.
And we did, I agree, Jamie, that we did give wide latitude to acting for the high school. I agree with you. I do personally think it'd be useful to have a discussion with our Board of Health and consulting physicians before we make a change to what we had previously done. But again, that's just my opinion. Mary, go ahead.
When Longmeadow Department of Health gave us the guidance that we should follow the DESE mandate, the DESE mandate was different because it was a differentiated masking policy. Then DESE updated their policy to say that if you are at 80%, then masking was optional but strongly recommended. So I too would just like reassurance from our local Department of Health that it is still their recommendation that we follow the DESE guidelines.
Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, I hear what everyone's saying, and I truly appreciate what the health department does and does for our community as well. But I've been here for 2.5 years of doing this, and they really have not provided very consistent guidance to us on a regular basis, and kind of jumped in front of us a few different times and kind of made messes of many situations. So I appreciate them. But, I'm not looking at this from a health and well-being. The health and well-being for the children is to get the mask off. If the health department feels and thinks from a health department that it's more appropriate for everybody to be masked, they have the authority to come and do that. And they can go do that. And that's fine. I'm just looking at from the education of these children. We've done 2 years of really taking things out on the children, and I'm looking at my 4 children, and we're taking it out on the children. It's time to kind of make the right decision education wise, and if they think we're doing something wrong, they should have a meeting and override us.
Thank you, Jamie. Bronley, go ahead.
Just a question for Marty. So Marty, we gave you this wide latitude when we did this, we had this vote. But I was wondering what you've done with that since you suspended the mask policy for the high school. I forget the exact date it was suspended. I was wondering, are you considering switching that? Are you just going to wait until the 28th, which is a whole nother month?
Like I said, if given that when you're giving me the latitude to submit the attestations, when the committee had approved the plan back in November for implementation in December, this is the trial period, the terms of that were that unvaccinated individuals would continue to wear masks. So those were the terms of the approval that the committee gave me. Now now that's changed, where you can access the 80% off ramp, and unvaccinated individuals would not have to. It would be highly recommended that they do. So the terms have changed. So I would just want the committee to approve the.
Why didn't you tell us this before? Why are you waiting till we bring it up?
I at your last meeting, I had included some information that DESE had altered the approach.
Did you ask us for our opinion, or you gave us information, but you didn't say, given this information, I would like some redirection, or let you tell me how you feel regarding this. You just gave us the information. I was under the impression that you were still using the latitude that we gave you, and just wondering when that was going to happen.
If that's the will of the committee to have me implement it or not, even with the new approach, then that's okay. I would just want the committee to.
I understand that, but you're saying, like, you gave us the information last week. I understand that. But if you want direction from us, you can't just provide information. You have to provide information and then say, seeing this information has changed since our initial vote in November, I would like you to give me direction on this. But it's like it's not being brought up until we bring it up. So it's like, I feel like it's kind of being ignored. So don't you feel like you should have said to us, here's the information, I'd like you to tell me what you want to do?
In fairness, what our entire administrative team and all of our nurses and all the health officials, our full energy has been devoted to dealing with the Omicron surge and pivoting once again to the new pre-K to 12 testing program. And the logistics of that have been significant. It's been a massive operational shift. And the other thing that happened from December vacation all the way through the first week of January was reinventing all of our reporting protocols for staff and families on COVID. It required a complete overhaul of all the reporting, the approaches to reporting. We completely reinvented all of our HR processes. We developed all new reporting forms for families and staff, and then like 5 minutes, DESE introduces a new pre-K to 12 testing program. I mean, we are, running to stand still, given this is changing. Not only is the virus changing, the surge came upon us. Now it's subsiding. All that's happening quickly, but we're also dealing with a whole lot of new protocols, and kudos to all the folks that have been involved in that, because that truly meant reinventing twice in the last 3 weeks, or 4 weeks probably, all of the COVID response protocols, everything, top to bottom, total reinvention of everything. And now if we want to, this can be another thing, we can put in place the off-ramp at the high school and middle school. If the committee were to vote and say, Marty, we would, you are able or not able to implement the 80% off-ramp, even with the new DESE approach, I'm fine with that, but I think that is worthy of, discussion, and my hope would be that we have that February 8th opportunity to sit down, get everybody in the room, hear from all the stakeholders, and figure out what our next steps would be. But certainly, if there's sentiment to committee to reinstate the high school optional mask approach, even with the new DESE guidelines on that, then that's something we're ready to do that. And then
okay, respectfully, Marty, you haven't answered my question. It's okay. So last week when you gave us the information, like you said, you didn't say, I plan on changing.
That's what we've been working and what we've been doing, and I did my best.
No, I was asking you about specifically about the masks.
I honestly, all of our attention, our attention has been fully focused on implementing the new pre-K to 12 testing program. Nurse Gartman has been vaccination records, and we're prepared to establish whether or not we're at 80%. do it as quickly as we possibly can.
I guess in the future, if we've given you latitude from several months ago, and you feel as though that's, and you feel as though you no longer want that responsibility, but you want to hear more from us, I am asking you to let us know that, because you didn't let us know that. So in my mind, you had the latitude. Apparently in your mind, you were thinking, I haven't heard any redirection from the committee until we brought it up tonight. So in the future, if you think it's changed, where it's no longer, you don't want that latitude any longer, you want us to make the decision, you need to tell us.
So I think in our next meeting, we'll be able to have that discussion after getting the information from the folks from the Board of Health and our consulting position, which I think will be good. And I know Gianna is hoping to jump in.
Yeah, so I was, I'll just speak for myself, as a member of this committee, as a teammate, as a collaborator with the superintendent. Every time I get information from the superintendent, you specifically say, if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, if you have any suggestions, comments, to please reach out to you. I personally, again, speaking for myself, I take advantage of that. Reach out to Mr. Manassa, and I have questions when I have thoughts. So I just want to be clear, speaking for myself, but as a member of this committee, every time you communicate with us, information or questions or whatever you need to sending out, you ask us, please call you, please contact you, please communicate with me. As a school committee member, I've been invited on several occasions to make my thoughts known to you, to have my questions shared. So.
Thank you, Gianna. Susie?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to one thing that the superintendent mentioned, and I'm definitely for off-ramps to the masking, for sure. I think one of the statements you made was about, the supervision and implementation. Regardless of where you stand on the issue, if DESE has allowed for a new approach to this that's not differentiated, I would think the supervision would be a little more relaxed, given the fact that you're not now having to enforce masking for one group versus masking for everyone. And so I understand the concern, but at the same time, I think it's alleviated to some degree from a supervisory standpoint alone. Yeah. That it's alleviated just to a big degree, actually. For that.
Yeah, partially alleviated. The part that wouldn't be would be that we would still want parents to consent.
Absolutely.
And so we would still want to monitor and enforce whatever parents tell us. If parents said that's the way we approached it last time. Again, we don't. That's not. I think it seemed to me that there had to be some level of accountability, and we want to be responsive to parents. So that part of it at the middle school level might be challenging. But again, honestly, I'm not opposed to reinstating the approach at the high school. I also didn't want to be presumptuous that I could do it, even though the rules had changed. I mean, they do it, so I'm for whatever,
Yeah. No, I think, I think it's very clear, and I think you took advantage of some of that latitude in the past when you delayed the start of the high school and you then suspended the at the high school. And I understand that you've been under a lot of, can't even imagine what you've been dealing with this recent surge and the reporting requirements and all of that. So I certainly understand that. But we also gave you latitude with preschool as well to do with the date of implementation what you wished. And so I think, I think there's definitely a communication and protocol clarification that we need to maybe address, that when we give you latitude, we would hope that you would just update us on how you want to exercise that latitude.
And so one question for me, because this came up in the visitor comments, and I'm actually curious if we know the answer. So if we just said we're not going to follow DESE's guidelines and we're just going to ignore them, like what happens if you ignore DESE? I mean, I just honestly have no idea.
I think you would, I don't know that there would be any immediate fallout. I think you'd probably have a whole lot of links through their PRS system, through the problem resolution system, if we weren't adhering to. And then the question is it, you know, whatever we're not adhering, anytime you do something a little differently, is it a guideline, is it a regulation, is it a statute? I mean, it sort of depends.
So it gets complicated.
It gets complicated. I mean, it's depending on what you choose not to follow. I mean, I'll give you an example. Is you know, the home testing kits that we distributed, right? So Bessie had said, you know, prescribe the day of the week that individuals test. And, you know, that to us locally didn't make a lot of sense. Like, why wouldn't we trust our families to make informed decisions about how to use the testing kits as they fit? So that was sort of the approach we took. You know, that's not disregarding a regulation, it's more disregarding low level guidance. So it really depends on, you know, how you choose to approach it. We had our approach to the pre-K to 12 testing program. It's had you know, it's been reviewed by health officials. So it gets kind of.
Sure. And just again, to complete the story, because I forgot to mention this before, the vaccination data that Marty presented last week for 5 to 11-year-olds, the fully vaccinated was 48%, right? So I think that if we're thinking about like where are we close to the 80%, like we're very close, if not over it, but we need to just, you know, make sure we do our due diligence at the middle schools. I don't think we're anywhere near it at the elementary school based on that number, right? So again, I just think it's important for the community to know that that 80% issue is not a reality at the elementary school based on where we were a week ago. And so just if I can summarize what we've said, just I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So Marty and his team are going to work to figure out where the middle schools are. And if they figure out before our next meeting that they're over the 80% threshold, they're going to submit that to the state and not wait until our next meeting. We are going to have 2 members of the committee go to the meeting with the town officials and the Board of Health and the consulting physicians in the afternoon on next Tuesday. And so those 2 members can report back to the full committee at our meeting later that day about what they hear. And it sounds to me like we want this as an agenda item at our next meeting. So that would lead us to have the budget hearing as sort of an open hearing, and then we can continue into a regular school committee discussion of this issue so we can make some decisions and give Marty some guidance as to what we should do at the high school and what we might be able to do at the middle school. Did I miss anything in that summary? Jamie?
I think you hit it all. The only thing I'll say that, at least from my perspective, I would expect is if you're coming back and you're saying that the middle schools, the high school, we're all set, having firm dates that are very tight timeline wise. You know, so if we're gonna have a meeting on the 8th, we got to be talking dates, you know, and we obviously have a school vacation in there. So my recommendation is come back with timelines about what we can do. I don't want to have a whole nother meeting talking about how we can implement and when. And you know, the last time we kind of went through this same scenario, everything got pushed out, and it turned into like, let's get this done next week or the following week to like a month and a half. I don't think it's fair, and mine comes back to the students. It's not fair to the students, and you know, I think we got to eventually come back to them and make the right decision for them. you know, as a you know, obviously an educated body here. So I just don't want this to keep getting drug out, because then we'll be at the 28th and it'll be a whole different scenario anyways. So.
Thank you, Jamie.
And
Ronald, go ahead.
Just
go ahead. Yeah, Jamie, go ahead. Jamie, go ahead.
Yep. Just last thing is, Marty, do you need? I think we kind of gave authority on the high school, and it's all semantics at this point. But do you need the authority for that? Do you need us to take a vote on that? Are you good with doing this, just so whenever we get back next week, we're like ready to go here and figuring out what we want to do as a committee, as a group?
I think when the committee initially approved it, they approved it, the terms were that unvaccinated individuals would continue to mask. Now, if we re-implemented it, it would only be highly recommended that unvaccinated individuals continue to mask. And there's a big part of me that's actually pleased with this, that, you know, that I would like to get to a fully mask optional for all. But I don't want to be presumptuous and reinstate the optional mask approach if it doesn't match the terms under which you approved it back in November. So.
No, Mark, I'm 100. I follow. You don't go through it again. Okay. I completely follow. It's more, do you want us to do a vote right now to say, hey, we're okay with this, to see if the group is? Or are you saying, you know, I can put a motion out there that would obviously say, are we okay with the high school? So when we get back on the 8th, you know, you can walk in and say, hey, the 9th, we're good. We're starting up. I know that's probably not the case, but, you know, so you're not constrained. I just feel like we're constrained, and I don't want to be holding you back, and I don't want a week to go on a decision that we could make tonight.
I've always appreciated and been willing to take on that authority, and having that flexible latitude has allowed us to pivot when things change. So, but if the entire committee is comfortable with implementing mask optional policy under the new terms, the vote would help me implement it. So I'm assuming it seems, at least, you know, from the conversation, it seems the committee is in favor of reinstating the mask optional approach at the high school, even under the different terms and conditions.
Yeah.
Again, I'll just say I'm pleased that Dusty has gone in this direction. I mean, I'm kind of at a point where I think it ought to be mask optional. I think the trial period worked. We worked hard on it. I think we did it right. But at this point, given what we're seeing, I think, you know, having at a building where we're highly vaccinated at the right time, to have it mask optional for all, I have no objection to that. But I just want to make sure that, you know, the committee is behind that as a body.
Do we know how many active COVID cases we had in high school?
Two and nine overall. So
2 of that.
2 of those were students.
Bronwyn, go ahead.
I made a request before that I don't feel like we got to. That was, Marty, I just want to request, you know, maybe it's, I missed it, and everyone else didn't. But if we voted on something and it's in your hands and you feel more comfortable with bringing it up to us, like you've changed your mind and you feel more comfortable bringing it back up to us, then please do so. Because for me, I was thinking that you were still good with changing the date when you wanted to change the date. I understand that because DESE changed their definition, that now you want some more formal input from the committee. I guess my request is just, even if just for me personally, if I'm the only one that didn't get it, can you let me know that, Rob, I've changed my mind. I think I'd like more direction from the committee, seeing that DESE has changed their definition. Just making it like super clear for me would be really, really helpful. So that's just a request that I have.
That makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense.
Any other comments or questions on that?
Is Gianna speaking?
I think that's what's going on.
There we go.
All right, sorry.
Yeah.
So I think, do we need Gianna to start over? People at home, you didn't hear Gianna at all? Got it, okay.
Yeah, so Jamie, so I was just asking, like, are we doing like a thumbs up? And I think you heard, Jamie, we're gonna do a motion.
So what I said in follow-up to that was, if anybody would like to make a motion, they're always willing and able to do so. I am unable to make a motion, but it sounds like that might be helpful at this point.
Yeah, and this is in regards to the high school change in DESE policy.
Yes.
First motion writer, but I can take a swing at it. So do we, I guess, Diane, do we have to reference the other policy, or do we just make an overarching policy that we're accepting the DESE changes?
If I might be able to just recommend something, I think I'm allowed to do that, Susie. I think we might just want to say, we maybe confirm our vote previously allowing the superintendent to follow DESE guidelines.
Reaffirm.
Thank you. Right, so something along, I don't think we need to make this complicated, right? Sorry, that's what you're looking for.
Yes.
Susie, please.
Would it help if I made the motion?
Please.
Yes, yeah.
I move that the school committee reaffirm the vote taken to engage the Long Meadow Public Schools and any of the schools that are at the 80% threshold for vaccination status.
To follow the DESE guidance.
To follow the DESE guidance as of January 10th.
I think it was the 10th.
It was 2022.
We're waiting to make sure Diane is good with that.
There might be a nutrient hand. Yeah, I think it's and to follow.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Go ahead.
Clarification on does the committee have any specific expectations on the date of implementation, or is that be determined by the administration?
Mary, do you want to take that one?
I have the same question. Are we agreeing to what you outlined earlier, Kevin, which is that once we confirm the vaccination status, or I understand the motion, but like I don't understand what the action item is. Is that?
I think Susie has a take on that.
Thank you.
The action item is simply reaffirming that the superintendent has the authority to make any follow-up decisions regarding this, but that we as a school committee are reaffirming that we're interested in implementing the 80% exemption for the mask mandate, because just to, with the updated guidance, with the updated recommended status for unvaccinated students. And so we're just giving clarification. Signaling, if the vote is affirmative and passes, then we're signaling to him that we're in favor of the updated guidance and implementing that in the schools where 80% exemption is able to take place.
And I would say we're not putting a date on it, other than to say, Marty, when you think you have the information you need, then you can follow the DESI guidelines.
The only question about that is there an expectation that it's done by next Tuesday so that we can discuss it further? We're not specifying that in the
Correct. So if there is an expectation, then we need to amend the motion, I think.
That what's done by next Tuesday, which part of
the
that?
submission to your submission to DESI that we're interested. Yeah. That's what I've heard in the previous discussion.
Well, and I think what we heard is that Marty said he and his team are going to do that as soon as possible.
Right.
And so I think that still stands for the most. Right.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as possible.
Right.
I mean, we're never afraid of hard work, and it's been 2 years of that. But I just want to, we'll do it as soon as possible.
Right.
There's a lot of competing priorities right now in terms of budget negotiations and some other matters. So we'll do it as soon as we possibly can.
Right.
I don't really love the open-endedness of that, so I'd like to amend the motion to have that done by next Tuesday, February 8th, I believe.
And so, Bronwyn, what you're saying is to have the middle school evaluation done by next Tuesday at the latest. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
To have the information on the 80% or to get a reply from DESI?
At least a submission to DESI. We can't control how long it takes them to reply. I do understand that.
Yeah.
But the submission, please. That's the amendment.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the motion. We need a second to the amendment.
Second.
Any discussion about the amendment? And again, the amendment is that we will submit to the state if we hit the 80% at the middle school, the submission. Again, we have to hit the 80% or we can't submit. Any discussion on that? Okay, Marty, do you think that you and your staff can get it done by Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions on the amendment? Okay, so we're going to vote now on the amendment, right? Susan?
Yes.
Gianna?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Bronwyn?
Yes.
And yes for me. Okay, so now we have an amended motion. Any further discussion on the amended motion? Okay, so I think we're ready to vote on that. All right, Susan?
Yes.
Gianna?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Bronwyn?
Yes.
And yes for me. Okay, so Marty, are you good with that as guidance from the committee?
Is there any expected date of implementation for the high school, the reinstating the optional mask policy at the high school? Or is that?
I mean, if you only have 2 cases, ASAP is my take.
Anybody want to weigh in on Marty's question, other than Bronwyn giving her take?
I think, it's fair to ask the medical people, the health people, there's still a matter of, not like just everything goes out the window and all of a sudden everybody's just running around unmasked. So I would just, I don't know, check in with the medical people and nurses and see in terms of, shifting. That's a big shift.
Yes, you, Jim. Mary, go ahead.
So I'm going to go back to my earlier comment, which is that the Department of Health had previously said that we could follow the DESE guidelines when there was a differentiated masking policy. So something we might consider is, Marty, you could institute the differentiated masking policy immediately, and then after the Department of Health has given the go-ahead on the new DESE guidance, I would feel more comfortable saying mask optional policy.
Thank you, Mary. Gianna, go ahead.
I just want to, I work in a much smaller school, but I work super closely with the our nurses and the testing people that come in. Again, it's only 300 kids in our elementary. I do value the time and the effort and the just all out, amazingness of them. That's a smaller school, and that's with fully masked people. So again, when I hear immediately, I would not be in favor of tomorrow. To me, that's immediate. I think we need to be respectful of the health people.
Well, and Marty, is it reasonable to, is it reasonable for our guidance to be, could you please check in with our consulting physicians and, Finn McCool, our health director, and just get their opinion about this before making a decision?
Yes, we do that. The intention of the meeting on the 8th, so when we roll out new approaches, it's always helpful to say that we engaged all stakeholders, that everybody was in the room, and everybody had an opportunity to, so that was the intention of the meeting on the 8th, was to be able to hear from all parties. And then the thought was, we would be in a position to make a shift. I said earlier that we've been trying to move along this continuum for 2 years, less restricted, more restricted. When we have made shifts, we've done it by engaging stakeholders. We've had these types of meetings that we have scheduled for the 8th. I think we drove for 2 years. I last took a biology course in high school. So it would be, I think, it would build consensus for the decision. It would build support for the decision to engage the team on the 8th and say, this is the will of the committee. This is where we're headed. But to have that final check-in, and then you could confirm, you could reconfirm it on the 8th. That would be my recommendation. I understand that, I'm as eager as anybody to remove the masks, and like I said earlier, I think an optional approach, I'm kind of glad that DESE has this new approach on the 80% offering. I think it's great. I really do. But if we're going to make the switch, it would be, I'd love the opportunity to sit down and get everybody in a room, including school committee, including town health officials, our 2 doctors just hired, we appointed Dr. Federico. We have an opportunity to sit with her. But I think to get everybody in the room, and then we could tell them on the 8th that this is where we're headed, and then you could reconfirm, then you're meeting it shortly after that. I get, we're all so anxious to take off the mask. I mean, we're all so tired of this, and we're getting there. But sometimes process is as important as the decision, and I would like the opportunity to talk to those folks. But ultimately, this is, committees across the country are making these decisions, and if that's the vote you take tonight, then we will implement that as soon as possible. I get it. These are tough decisions. I think the important thing, I always say, a lot of this is about let's go into this as a team with all the stakeholders. We may not all like the direction that we're going, but as long as we continue to engage with all stakeholders to some extent, I think we're going to be in good shape. We all know where this is headed. We're all headed to our optional mask policy. It's coming. How quickly do we want to get to that is the question.
So Marty, just to follow up, if in that meeting on the 8th, the health folks are like, yeah, follow DESI, makes perfect sense. That comes back to this committee, and we're like, yeah. When do you think we could then implement this?
You could do it on the 9th, but at least people have some advantage. You give people some notice that this vote is being taken. If it's successful, we're gonna implement this on the 9th. Okay. And so I think you can do it that quick, but a lot of this is about process and just working together as a team with all the parties involved, and I think it would strengthen if this is the direction you want to go, it's going to ultimately strengthen your vote. If you're able to say, we had the opportunity that we managed the process, we have a chance to. That would be my recommendation. But I get it. I get that. Other committee, they get the urgency for some. I understand it.
Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, in thinking about the policy as it was for the high school in December was every make yes or no, it could be the answer to this, but decisions of families to allow their children to be unmasked could have been made on the differentiated approach previously. So I think you are going to have to do some legwork around re-surveying potentially families who perhaps now want their child to remain masked. So I don't know. Then you also have to get the will of the unvaccinated families, the students' families who are.
There is communication.
Yeah.
I just want to be, as we have all along, I just want to be thoughtful about process. I want to be thoughtful about communication, and there is some additional information we're going to need from families on top of moving the middle school decision along. So we're getting there. We are. But can't let we tell other communities have been torn apart by this, and we can't let that happen. We've got to stay together as a community and approach this with all the needs of all and the voices of all stakeholders. So,
Bronwyn, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm a little confused. Kevin, you asked for input from the committee. I heard a couple people say immediately, right away, whatever. But then that seems to have changed. But I guess my question is, if there's a meeting with the stakeholders, even though this is a school committee decision, the Board of Health basically said, we're have a mask mandate for the entire town. And there was especially said, this does not include the schools, because they wanted us to make the decision. So that part's a little bit confusing to me, and Jamie did allude to that before. But I guess my question is, if we just voted tonight to have this happen and have Marty send the stuff in by next Tuesday, and then there's a meeting prior to our meeting, and for some reason there's differing opinions than our vote that we had tonight, then what happens?
And so, Brahma, let me just make sure I understand, because I think there's two things going on. So we can submit this stuff to the state about the middle schools, but that doesn't mean we have to act on it, right? So when we submit it to the state, they just then say oh, now you can take advantage of this, but you don't have to, right? So I don't think that us submitting it would be contradicted by anything that is said at the meeting prior to our meeting on the 8th. Am I misunderstanding? Right.
I guess I was under the impression that if we were asking for it, then that meant that we would utilize it.
Well,
I don't know why we would ask and then be like, just kidding.
The thing I would say is Marty and I have talked a decent amount about how other communities did this, and other communities would submit their 80%, and then they would say, all right, when are we going to implement it? And so they didn't implement it right away. And there are some communities, according to what Marty said, is that they got the approval before the winter break, and they never even implemented it before the winter break, right? So I think, to me, it's two separate things. It's getting the option to do something and then deciding when you're going to do that, right? So I think the information we get from the public health folks will help us figure out when we're going to do it.
Okay. I think you asked before for volunteers to attend the meeting, so I'd like to attend the meeting.
Yeah, and again, I think there are a bunch of folks who want to, so I will definitely have you down, and others just let me know, and then we'll sort of figure out who's going to go. Absolutely. Jenna, go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, Brian, I think originally I was talking about the process and, wanting to check in with the school nursing staff and the medical staff. And what I thought I heard superintendent say was just a matter of process and courtesy, just letting the people on the 8th know. Because he also said we could let them know on the 8th that this is what we decided and we could implement starting on the 9th. So I don't know if you heard that or not, but I was under the impression we're not asking for permission from the people on the 8th. We're just giving them the courtesy of this is what we decided tonight, and give people a little bit of time to digest it between now and then. And then, as superintendent said, we could start it on the 9th because we're following this process of the next couple of days.
Thank you, Gianna. That's actually super helpful clarification. Thank you.
It could be, but that's what I heard.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Marty, do you feel like you're in good shape with direction from the committee? Okay. Okay. We are done with our agenda. There is a Jamie did? Oh, sorry. All right, Jamie, go ahead.
Yep. Last thing. I'm not on that topic, but so once we finish with the middle schools, the high school, then February 28th comes up, and then it may be other options. I don't want to just concentrate only on those and not the elementary schools. I do want to have a secondary conversation about the elementary schools, what we're doing on the 8th as well. Just to put that on the record.
Yeah, and Jamie, that's a good point. And I think depending on how things go on the 8th, that conversation may get tabled until the 15th, just depending on how long stuff goes. But I know that Marty and I had originally thought that the elementary school discussion on the 15th would make the most sense. So we'll see how the discussion goes on the 8th. But yeah, I think it's got to happen either the 8th or the 15th. So
yeah. That was the intention of this agenda item, was just to position us for the next shift.
Yeah. Mary, go ahead.
I just want to reiterate something that Susie said earlier about, if you do need to collect parent permission, Marty, I don't know how that will work. Would the turnaround time be as quick as decision on the 8th, implementation on the 9th? And is it possible for you to have prepared correspondence to go out to families to get that permission very quickly so that it wouldn't get held up with waiting for parents to give permission and communication to parents and having to put that together? I just want to be proactive about that too.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We'd have to figure out what the parental consent part of this is going to be. I mean, there are some districts that did this even when they were doing the original 80% off ramp approach, that didn't allow parents to consent. In other words, the kids were making the decisions, which, I don't know, but I need some time to think about that, frankly. But we'll be in a go position either way.
Anything else? All right. I think that we have a recommended motion for adjourn.
I move that the school committee adjourn the February 1st, 2022 school committee meeting.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, we will get the vote. Susie?
Yes.
Gianna?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
And yes for me. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you back here in a week. Bye.
Bye.